Picture this. You wake up in a world where entire nations are just falling. Cities are burning, and literally millions of lives are about to change forever. We're looking at World War II. From 1939 to 1945, this was a massive, truly global catastrophe. Empires clashing across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. It's the deadliest conflict in human history. But in this explainer, we're going to trace a very specific thread. We're exploring how this devastating war completely transformed the United States, taking it from a reluctant, mostly isolated bystander to an absolute global superpower.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a devastating global war turn America into the most powerful nation on Earth? It's a massive historical shift, right? Over the next few minutes, we're going to break the whole thing down. We'll look at the origins of the conflict, those nail-biting turning points on the battlefield, the unbelievable society-wide mobilization on the home front, and finally, the lasting geopolitical impact of this war from the American perspective.
Section 1. The Road to War. Global Instability and the 1939 Catalyst.
So, after the sheer devastation of World War I, a lot of countries were really struggling. I mean, we're talking severe economic ruin and deep political instability, largely thanks to the crushing weight of the Great Depression. In the 1930s, the global environment was incredibly volatile. Over in Germany, Adolf Hitler exploited that desperation. He rose to power promising to restore the nation's strength and pretty much immediately started expanding Germany's territory. This aggressive push finally reached a breaking point in September 1939 when German forces launched a lightning-fast blitzkrieg invasion right into Poland. That was the spark. Britain and France honored their alliances, declared war on Germany, and boom, World War II had officially begun. By the early 1940s, the conflict was spreading like wildfire. Germany was rapidly conquering much of Europe, while over in Asia and the Pacific, Japan was aggressively expanding its own imperial reach.
Now, while all this was escalating into a truly global fight, the U.S. initially decided to stay officially neutral. But look, being neutral on paper definitely didn't mean they were uninvolved. Through a program called Lend-Lease, America essentially became this critical lifeline to the allied nations fighting the Axis powers. The U.S. was sending billions of dollars worth of vital cargo. We're talking food, oil, warships, planes, industrial resources, the whole shebang. They essentially bankrolled the survival of Great Britain and the Soviet Union, all before officially firing a single shot in the war.
Section 2. Pearl Harbor, the inciting incident.
So, the crucial point here is December 7th, 1941. This is the absolute world-altering moment that shattered that fragile American neutrality. What started as a totally quiet Sunday morning turned into a nightmare when Japanese aircraft launched a massive surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The destruction was just immense and immediate. American battleships were completely crippled or sunk, and over 2,000 Americans were killed in a matter of hours. The horrific reality of the war had violently arrived right on America's doorstep.
The fallout from that morning was absolute. The very next day, the United States formally declared war on Japan. You've probably heard President Franklin D. Roosevelt's famous words, calling it a date which will live in infamy. But the escalation didn't stop there. In this rapid, crazy domino effect of international alliances, Germany and Italy honored their pact with Japan and immediately declared war on the U.S. In just a few frantic days, America went from quietly supplying the Allies to being a full-fledged active combatant forced directly into a grueling two-front war.
Section 3. The Arsenal of Democracy. America mobilizes.
America was now fully in the fight, and the domestic shift that followed was, frankly, staggering. Almost overnight, peacetime factories that used to make civilian cars, refrigerators, and everyday household items completely overhauled their assembly lines. They instantly pivoted to churning out heavy military machinery at a pace the world had literally never seen before. Auto manufacturers stopped building family sedans and started rolling Sherman tanks and B-24 bombers off the line. This unmatched industrial output, building weapons way faster than the enemy could destroy them, is exactly what cemented America's legendary status as the engine driving the Allied war effort.
But you know, it wasn't just about steel and machines. It was about an unbelievable scale of human mobilization. Over 16 million American men and women put on the uniform and shipped off to face grueling conditions in Europe and the Pacific. And equally vital were the millions more who powered the domestic war effort back home. Women entered the industrial workforce in unprecedented numbers, permanently changing the cultural fabric of the country just to keep production moving. Coastal shipyards were running around the clock. They were famously building massive Liberty ships in a matter of weeks and eventually days to maintain those endless global supply lines you need to fight a war across two vast oceans.
Section 4. Turning the Tide.
3 pivotal battles.
All that massive production was absolutely vital because it allowed the momentum to finally shift away from the Axis powers across 3 incredible interconnected clashes. Step 1. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway dealt a permanently crippling blow to the Japanese fleet. Thanks in large part to some brilliant code-breaking, American forces ambushed Japan's aircraft carriers, which fundamentally changed the naval balance of power. Step 2. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the Soviet Union made this bloody, legendary stand in the freezing snows of Stalingrad. They stopped a seemingly invincible German advance through brutal, block-by-block winter fighting, essentially breaking the back of the German military. And Step 3, June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 150,000 Allied forces launched an epic amphibious invasion onto the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy. They punched a hole right into occupied France, opening up a major Western front in Europe. The noose was finally tightening.
Section 5. Victory and a New World. The Dual Surrenders.
By 1945, the situation for the Axis powers was totally collapsing. Allied forces were closing in on Germany from both the east and the west. Facing total defeat and a ruined capital, Germany officially surrendered in May 1945, ending the fighting in Europe. But the war in the Pacific was still raging on with ferocious intensity. And that brings us to August 1945, a moment that forever changed human history. The United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was the dawn of the atomic age, instantly unleashing unprecedented, terrifying destruction that vaporized entire city centers in mere milliseconds. Just weeks later, in September 1945, Japan formally surrendered. After 6 agonizing years, World War II had finally come to an end.
The end of the war brought a profoundly sobering reality. Tens of millions of people were dead. This conflict was a story of ultimate sacrifice, completely ruined nations, and unimaginable tragedy. But born directly out of those ashes was a totally new geopolitical era. The United Nations was created with the desperate hope of fostering diplomatic cooperation and making sure a global war like this never happened again. At the same time, the world was thrust into this rapidly advancing technological age, characterized by nuclear capabilities, really complex international alliances, and the looming, tense ideological standoff of the Cold War.
And this brings us right back to the core theme we started with today. Out of all this profound global destruction, the United States emerged completely transformed. Through its immense industrial output, a newly battle-tested military, and a domestic infrastructure that was totally untouched by bombs, America stepped out of the ruins of the 1940s not just as a victorious nation, but as a dominant global superpower. The sleeping giant had well and truly awakened. It held a temporary monopoly on atomic weapons and forever shifted its stance from isolationism to permanent, active global engagement.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to consider. Are we still living in the world built in 1945? Think about it. The destruction, the courage, the sacrifice, and the incredible global transformations of World War II aren't just dry history confined to textbooks. They created the very bedrock of our current international institutions, our global politics, our technological advancements, and honestly, our daily lives. The decisions made and the battles fought between 1939 and 1945 changed the course of humanity forever. I want you to really reflect on that as we wrap up this explainer, because understanding how that giant awakened is absolutely crucial to understanding the world we live in right now.